Welcome to Reframed. I'm your host, Brooklyn Grady. Let's reframe your approach to business and life together. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Reframed. I am so excited about my guest today. I have personally worked with Sarah. She completely transformed my website, spoiler alert. And so I can't wait for you guys to hear all that she has to say. I would like you to welcome Sarah Kleist.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Sarah. I'm so pumped to chat with you today. And to clarify for listeners, where are you at right now?
Like in the world?
Yes.
Yes. So I live in New York City. So I'm just in my apartment currently.
Just hanging out. Cool.
Yeah.
If you're watching this, I love your like the atmosphere that you show being in New York City. It's just so different than like Midwest. And so at first I was wondering if we could hear a little background noise with like where you're at, but like is a city hustle and bustle pretty common?
Yeah, I feel like, so my apartment unit is in the back half of the building, which we did purposely because my boyfriend is a music producer and we have like a little like recording studio set up in our apartment, and he has people come over to record sometimes. Okay. So we purposefully tried to find an apartment that was like away from the street
for a little bit less noise.
So you probably actually can't hear anything from where I'm sitting at this current moment, but okay. I am always like on my Instagram story, just like posting little city scenes and things because I love it.
Just out in the world. And I kind of got diverted there because I thought I heard some background noise. So that's why I asked you where you're at. But I don't think we can. So bummer there. Anyways, let's go back to the beginning. Let's have you introduce yourself. Tell us what you do. And I guess we know where you're at now. So what do you specialize in?
Yeah. Okay. So hi, I'm Sarah. I do so many things. The reason that we know each other is because I did your website. I'm a brand and web designer. I think Duo Collective did your branding and then I did your website.
Yes. And you killed it, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you.
So I have a brand and web design business, but I also am a performing artist, an actor, singer, which is why I live in New York. Yeah, I do mostly like musical theater in that realm. So I'm here because Broadway's here. Yeah. And yeah, I write, I create content, like I do a whole bunch of things. But the two main things are like the actor singer side of my life and also the brand and web design side of my life.
I love how you've merged the two as well. For those that don't follow Sarah, go follow Sarah right now. Also TikTok too. We're going to talk about like where people can find you, but your content is somehow you make it so relatable, even though the two worlds are seemingly unconnected. So
thank you.
Yeah, I would love to hear if you want to talk a little more about that. Like, how do you mix the two? What's that been like for you and your business?
Yeah. Okay. So there's actually, it comes off of the realization that I had a few years ago that my work in the web and branding, like visual space, is very similar to the work I do in the theater space because like when it really all boils down to it, marketing is just theater. So I always say like it's the same skill, different fonts. So because basically, like as an actor, I'm stepping into other people's shoes to tell a story to an audience. And as a brand and web designer, I'm also stepping into other people's shoes to tell a story to an audience digitally. So yeah, that's basically the gist. And once I realized that and had that realization, I was like, oh, okay, all of this belongs together. I think a lot of people, like when they're multi-passionate, they have like a lot of different creative pursuits. They think like, okay, I have to separate these things because it's like 4 different audiences. Right. But once I realized just how similar those things are, I was like, let's like center my entire like messaging and brand around that like core thing, and then have like the ways in which I do that, whether it's acting, whether it's branding, whether it's web design, whatever, be like offshoots of that. So like I kind of view all of my different like hyphenates as just different services I offer. So yeah.
And they're all by you. I think it's so refreshing to see someone doing that, like you said, in a world where you're kind of told to niche down and talk to one audience. And you are still talking to one audience, but it's the messaging that you do it with. It's so unique. And I love how you meld those two together. I think it's really cool. It's just refreshing to see too, because we're so used to like, okay, you do X and you do Y, and we're going to keep them separate. So that's really unique. I would love to hear more about your background, like getting into web design. Tell us a little bit of your story. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. Okay. So, I have always been like an actor, creative, like just all around creative person. And I, have lived in New York now like 12 years. And so, before I did web design, I was like working in restaurants and like doing like the very like stereotypical, like starving artist in New York kind of vibes. Then the pandemic hit. I was working at a restaurant at the time. And everything in New York City shut down because obviously we all live on top of each other here, and it was very dangerous. So yeah, basically everything closed. My restaurant closed, Broadway closed. Like I was like doing nothing, literally zilch zero. Like I was so bored. And I'm just like not the kind of person that can just sit and just twiddle my thumbs and, wait for someone to tell me what to do. Like I was like, okay, like any sort of creative project. So it started because I was like redoing my own website, and I was in a lot of like different like Zoom online communities with like other creatives or actors who were like working on their web presence. Cause that was like the one thing that we could do at that time. Like, I feel like every actor was like, okay, you want to stay productive on your career? Like just redo your website right now, Right. So we all were doing that, and I had so much fun like redoing my own. And then I was like in a group text. My friends were like, I don't know, mine sucks. Like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, just give me your password. Like, let me fix this.
Let me do it.
Yeah. So I just like did a couple websites, just for literally my good friends. And, they were like, wait, this is so good. What is happening? And then, when we published their sites, they would post about it. And they were, of course, tagged me and were like, thanks to my friend for helping me make this look good. And then I had a few people after that reach out that I didn't know at all, being like, how much do you charge for this? And I'm like, how much do I charge for this? I have no idea. Like, I don't charge for this, but obviously because I didn't know who they were, I was like, okay, well, I have to charge something.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
So literally just started from there, and it kind of spiraled into this whole thing ever since.
This whole business, this successful web design business.
Yeah.
So cool. Yes. And how I came to know you, you'd mentioned a little bit, but for people listening, I did a big rebrand with Duo Collective. Shout out to them. They're also incredible. And they're Minnesota based, so they're not too far from me. They did rebrand, and they suggested you, Sarah, to do web design because I was feeling really lost. And at that point, I had never paid someone to design my website. I was kind of a do-it-yourselfer, like get a Wix account or whatever, like free, web service I could find. I think I was maybe Squarespace before you, which was equally great. It just like, for me, I wasn't a big website designer. Like I have the creative bones, of course, from being a photographer, but the design process to me, I was like, okay, I just need somebody to do this for me, and I want an outside perspective. So they recommended me to you. Sarah absolutely slayed my website. You were so good with the process too. We should talk a little more about that too. Like the onboarding process and the clear communication, like you had clear expectations of what I could expect when you delivered on all of it. And I think it's fascinating to hear your backstory too of where you came from. And so many people, I think, in the entrepreneurial world feel, well, I've had this said to me before. I shouldn't put words in their mouth, but I've heard it said that like, if you don't have a degree or you haven't like done the specific training, that like it's hard to make it as a business owner or as like a creative, but that's so not true. And you are living proof of that too. Like you have the ability to design, and no matter how you get started with it, like you have the capabilities to make it into whatever you want. So that's
absolutely. I agree. I actually have a hot take on this.
Yes, let's hear it.
I feel like, this doesn't apply to everyone, and I just want to be so clear about that. But I feel that sometimes going to school or having a degree in something for a certain type of person actually makes them worse at that thing. And I say this because I went to acting school and conservatory, theater conservatory, and actively going made me a worse actor. Like I was a better actor before I went because once I learned all the like techniques and rules, quote unquote, of theater, I'm an intellectualizer, and it took me completely out of the craft and the art form. To the point where it took me like half a decade to like unlearn a lot of the how to unlearn all that. So in that same way, like I actually think what makes me a skilled designer is that I actually could not tell you any technical rule. It is purely instinct and things that I've just like learned
and creative ability,
from watching other talented people. And I think the ability to not overthink is actually more beneficial to me in a way. I will say doesn't apply to everyone, but I think if you're like an intellectualizer like that, like school and training can actually be detrimental, weirdly.
Yeah. It almost like forces you into a box that you maybe really didn't need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Good hot take. That's cool. So as you're building your business, tell us about like one of your biggest struggles when you first became your own boss. Also, I would love a little backstory too about like, were you working before? I mean, you said you were a waitress and then the world kind of shut down. And then from there, like how did you get things going to have a successful business, and like what struggles did you face doing that?
Yeah. Well, so I was like very lucky in that when I started this business, I was on unemployment. So I like had a really seamless transition. Like I had some income and also at the same time was like learning and, you know, not necessarily like making money, just like experimenting with like my friends' websites and whatever. So like I had a pretty like easy transition from the shutdown to the design business. But that's like the one thing whenever people are like, how do you quit your, you know, your job? And I'm like, don't ask me. Like, I don't know. I like really lucked out on the timing.
I love your honesty. Thank you for just being real about it.
Yeah. So I just like in the pandemic, just like never had to go back to a different job, which is great. Nice. So we love that. Also because like, even though I was making like so much less money, obviously in the beginning, but I also was not going anywhere or like doing anything because
you couldn't. Where were you going to go?
Exactly. So it kind of just worked out that like, I don't know. It just magically worked out, and thank God for that.
The universe just was like, here you go, Sarah. Here's what you got to do.
Yeah, so exactly. Cool. Although now that I'm looking back, I did take a part-time like gig as someone's VA for like a little while. But again, it wasn't like crazy. But anyway, same kind of like world. Like I was doing like graphics and like blogging and stuff for them. Yes, I think my biggest challenge in the beginning was pricing because I come from like a world of like theater folks who are all like starving artists and like don't have budgets to spend on anything. I really, really severely undercharged for like a long time until I started becoming more friends with like people in the entrepreneurship space, and I realized like how much a website really should be because of not only the time it takes but also the value it provides to the business.
It's huge, right?
So pricing and like the money mindset of like getting over like charging like a livable amount was the biggest hurdle for me.
And when it's your friends to boot too, I mean, that was when you got started. But this is such a common feeling, even for photographers. I think most small business owners, because when you're pricing yourself, like you said, you have the mindset stuff that comes in, makes you question everything. And then you dig into that and you're like, wait, is this like mindset beliefs I was taught as a kid? Is this like just because my view of money is different than what my customers is going to be? So I think hearing that was a struggle for you, even like seeing you. And I remember even just like when I first looked up your website and like your stuff, and it was so obvious right away that you were very talented, and I didn't have any doubt that you'd be able to do a great job. And so from an outside perspective, I valued you tremendously, but as like your own self, like trying to price yourself, you have a different perspective. And
yeah,
I mean, even myself, and I go through this with a lot of coaching clients too, and I do photography coaching, money and pricing is just such a big obstacle. It feels like it's that big monster that's like intimidating. And even kind of a tangent here, but like taking money out and just being like, no, this is just a vehicle to get what we want. Like it doesn't need to have an emotional connection to it, but that's easier said than done, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think like depending on like how you grew up or whatever, like my parents are musicians and like I grew up like lower middle class in Wisconsin, like money. And my brain was always in a starving artist mindset and just like from birth, literally. So, that, and it's still something that I have to work through. Like I have, one of my good friends is a copywriter, and she, is someone who really helped me with the money mindset of it all over the years. But she still is always like, you still need to raise your prices. You still need to raise, like, it's still something that like I have to jump over the hurdles of. But yeah, it gets better as you continue on.
It does. And I think as more people book you, your confidence grows. Like, oh, people do value this. Oh, they will pay me for this. Like maybe, this is just my own thing in my head. But yeah, you're not alone at all in that. I would love to hear a little bit more about how you manage your time. And for those listening, you've had some hot takes and some great methods on your socials. So could you just expound? You can start at ground zero too if you want and tell us like how this started for you. Please share.
Okay, I love this. Okay, so I am like a huge time batcher now, which like when I first started and I heard, like I would listen to a lot of podcasts and people would talk about like time batching and all this stuff. I'd be like, okay, like we get it. Everyone time batches. But it really, the thing that takes the most time for me is if I have to transition from one like mindset to another. So since I have really discovered that, it has made so much more sense for me to put like tasks with like tasks so that I can, have less transitions. So a big thing for that for me recently this year was I used to do like projects with different kinds of timelines. So like I would do fully custom projects that would be like 4 to 6 weeks. I would do like, smaller template customization projects that were either like a day or a week long. Now I only do the day or the week, or if we're doing a fully custom, they're like booking me for an entire month and I only work on one project for like whatever length of time we're on. Beforehand, I used to be working on like 4 projects at a time and like, no, like we cannot be doing we cannot
focus
be doing
on
that.
one. Yeah.
Yes. So now I just do one at a time. So that has helped me a lot. I also so usually like 4 days a week, I'm working on like whatever project I'm supposed to be working on at that time. And then every Monday is like my business day. I like create all my content. I like do my like admin stuff, like anything that's like building my own brand, that's on Mondays. And like if I have other pockets of time throughout the week, I will also as well. But that is like the day that is like reserved for me.
I was thinking about, wasn't your to done list featured? I would love for you to expound on that too.
Yes. So, okay. So for context for anyone listening, so I do this thing. I've done this thing actually ever since I think I started in like 2018. So like way before I had a design business, like way before anything. Basically, I was feeling like I wasn't being like productive enough, quote unquote, which is like very hustle culture 2018, like reminiscent of those times. But I definitely felt like I wasn't like making strides in my acting career. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to like start writing down what I do every single day just to like see if there's like data I can like see of like how I'm spending my time essentially. And so I would write down every morning. I would write down everything I did the day before, which the only people ask, like, why don't you do it at night? And it's literally because I'm just so bad at keeping a nighttime routine. So like I only do that. Yeah, exactly. And then at the end of the week, I would like compile all the highlights. At the end of the month, I would compile all the monthly highlights. And then like I realized after a few months, like, oh, this is actually like a really cool practice because I have like a log of everything I did. And like, sure, I like delete the stupid stuff, like took out the trash or whatever. Like, I don't need to know that I did that in January of 2018. But like, it is cool to look back now and like see the highlights of like, oh, I like sang on this album in January of 2018, or I like went to this audition and had a really great callback and whatever. Right. So I've been doing that ever since. So it's been, I guess, like 6 years or so that I've been doing that. And I love it. So anyway, so it's called my to-done list because it's like a to-do list, but like what you already had done. And I've talked about it quite a lot on like social, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. And maybe it was December. I don't remember, whatever, a year ago. The Wall Street Journal like found my TikTok that I made about it and was like, hey, like we're writing about this concept and like your video came up. So I got to do a little interview with the Wall Street Journal about that. So that's really fun.
No big deal. Guys, Sarah's been featured on the Wall Street Journal if you didn't catch that. Hello. So cool. And the idea of that, because hustle culture, and especially as entrepreneurs, you're constantly running a to-do list and you're feeling like you're not doing enough. And then every time you do something new, at least for me, I get in my head because I'm like, well, I'm failing at this or this isn't working. But then to have the record to be able to go back and look at what you've accomplished, even just for your own mindset, like get you back in the headspace of like, oh, wait, I have crushed it. I have done some amazing stuff. Like I'm doing fine.
Truly game changing. Also, even just like in my personal life, like I was just September, like I was feeling like a hermit and I was feeling very much like, I don't know. I feel like I'm not having like a lot of like fun, whatever. And then I like went through my to-done list for the month of September and I like saw all the things that I did that were like recreational, like whatever, like things I wrote down. And I was like, oh no, I'm just being dramatic. Like I actually have done a lot and I do have friends. You know what I mean? Like, so it can
like
be
a reality check. Oh, wait.
Yeah, like it can be helpful if you find yourself to be someone who gets in like a weird mental mood or you think something about yourself, like, no, you have the data, like right there, you're fine. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine. Even if you're having a slight mental breakdown, like go look. Just go check your to-done list. It will help. Awesome. I love that. Okay, let's get back into a little more like your web design stuff and how what can you talk to us about like why having your website professionally done? In my case, you are the professional. And like how is that beneficial for small businesses? Like what does that do for people?
Well, okay. So obviously, besides just the fact that it's going to look freaking sick and like on brand and very cool.
Right.
I think the biggest transformation that like people often experience that they don't quite expect that they're going to have is getting all of the content that your audience needs to read and when they need to read it and on what pages they need to read it in the right order in a way that actually makes them inquire or buy the thing or whatever. Like getting those sections correct and in the right order, in the right like design aesthetic is like mind-bogglingly like improves people's websites. Like I think people often, if they're DIYing, I think the biggest mistake I see people make is like not having enough on there about their process or who they're, who they're for or the pain points of those people. Simply because it's hard to, like, if you're not a copywriter, how would you know, like, how to structure a website like that? So I think that's, like, the biggest thing. Like, I think people usually underestimate how much their audience actually needs to read from them in order to know, like, and trust them. So, yeah.
And that there's an order and a science to it. Like, it's not just toss up a header image and you're done. It's like, no, there is a flow to this. That's cool that you have figured that out too in all of your experience with designing. Also, for those listening, you are Show It certified. Is that the right way to put it? Or Show It or partner?
Yeah, basically. It's like they're called design partners. Yeah. But yes, exactly.
Okay. So talk to us a little about that. Like, why do you love Show It? What's that experience been like for you? And also,
Okay,
what does that little like designer, status mean?
Yeah. Okay. So, Show It is the website platform that I design on. They have been around for a while, but I feel like they really like popped off during the pandemic in terms of like people understanding what they are and who they are.
Mm-hmm.
They originally were a platform that they targeted and marketed towards photographers because there's a lot of design freedom. But ever since the pandemic, like other creatives started to play around with their platform and their software and realized like, oh, wow, this is like great for so many different kinds of creatives, whether you're a podcaster or an interior designer or a makeup artist or whatever.
Actress.
But essentially the reason I'm obsessed with it is because it is drag and drop. So instead of, before I discovered Show It, I actually did a lot of my After Site friends sites on Squarespace and realized truly just how much code you need in order to make things look cute and fun on there. And when I started playing around with the Show It, within like a couple hours, I was like, oh my God, holy shit. Like there's so much freedom here. Like, yeah, it's just so
user-friendly too.
It's so user-friendly. So yeah, that is why I love it. Also because like I always, whenever I work with someone, I always send them a little tutorial video, kind of walking them through the site, showing them how everything works. And it's just, in my experience, it has been so much easier for clients to update themselves. Like, because no one has to email me being like, how do I fix this code? Because there's no code involved. So that is why I love it and use it. And the community itself is really great as well. They are like, I guess they would still consider themselves like a small business, even though they have like a whole team and like they're like definitely a company,
right,
with a capital C. But they are based out of Arizona, and they're really great. And I'm like close with a bunch of people on their staff now. But they have a vetted group of designers called design partners. It's like a year-long process to become one of them. And basically like you send them your client work, you send them like examples of things, they like check it for everything that needs to be checked in order to be like their design partner. They even reach out to your past clients to like make sure the experience working with you is great. Like it is truly vetted. So yeah, that is fun. So I'm one of their design partners, and they're actually having a conference for designers at the end of this month, and I'm going to go speak at it.
Amazing. That's so awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm stoked for that. And I'm actually talking about brand photo shoots. So fun to be talking to you.
Timely. That's so cool. Oh, by the way, like Sarah's a boss at planning your brand photo shoots, if you didn't know too.
Yes.
She does it all.
When I say, like, whenever people are like, what do you do? I'm like, I do so many things. But no, the reason I got into helping people plan brand photo shoots is because I had so many clients being like, okay, I'm doing my website, but I need a photo shoot first. Like, where should I go do this? And then I'd be like, I don't know, here's like 10 location ideas that I feel like would look good on your site. Like, I don't know. So yeah, it's like a whole thing, but.
And that is equally as important in my opinion. Like if you don't have bomb pictures that are on brand, I think it makes your website fall so flat. And I mean,
absolutely.
What's your opinion on that?
80% of what makes a website look good is the images. Like I straight up at this point, like can't really work with anyone who doesn't have good imagery, because it's like, what are we going to put on there?
Right. Yeah. And then you rely on stock images and then it looks similar to everybody else. It's not super personalized. And you can have the best like copy in the world. You could have the best design in the world. You can have the best flow. Like you said, it goes from here to here to here. But if your images aren't also talking to your customer in the same tone as your design and your copy is.
I agree. I always say whenever people are like, I'm starting a business, like, what should I prioritize? Like, I have no money. I'm like, first thing to prioritize is get a brand photo shoot. Like, before you do literally anything else, because without imagery, you can't really like post on Instagram. Like, what are you going to post?
Right.
You can't
your
really,
selfies.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't really have like a website, because again, what's going to be on your website? Like I always say, like even before branding, even before everything, I'm like, get a brand photo shoot. Like It's the best. You can easily find a font you like and type out your font and call that your logo when you're just starting. Like, that's totally chill. But what you can't do is like not have any photos to post.
And please don't just like go on AI to generate some like professional headshots. That's a whole other tangent. But as a photographer myself, I've tried it because of research development. I was like, I got to know what I'm up against here, but like, just go get some brand photos taken. And if you need help planning it, reach out to Sarah or, hey, I know a photographer too. So that could help.
Yes, exactly.
So cool. I should chat more with you too. Like, yeah, we'll chat more about brand photography after. But I think it's so cool that it's a service you offer too to help people plan, because I think that can be a missing link. Even when you book a photographer, some aren't always doing that thorough planning process. And also as a photographer, you're not always, like for me, for example, I'm not the web designer. So I can have them tell me, hey, I need an image for my header that needs to be horizontal. But beyond that, I'm not really aware of I do an in-depth questionnaire to like get the gist of their brand feeling, which I'm sure you do all that as well. Like just, and I even remember in our design process, you wanting as much information as possible. Like, hey, I want this to really feel like you. So I think it's cool that you're almost like the middleman, because you can facilitate all of it. Can you talk to us about like a past client that you've done this for? Or I think it's really cool that you do this.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's cool because like that is exactly why I started doing that and offering that, because I noticed there was a disconnect, like because there are some brand photographers who offer like that as like an in-depth, like they'll do a mood board, they'll do like a shot list, all this stuff. But I feel like there's less photographers that do that than don't do it.
Yes,
wait,
I get it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's more common to find one that will just take your photos versus like do the whole in-depth.
And also just choosing the right photographer for your brand. Like you need to have like the background of like what the vibe needs to be anyway, which I feel that's another, like before you even speak to someone, you have to know like who is going to be good for what you're trying to
you want.
Do.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I just noticed there's like a lot of clients who like really like wanted a really great photo shoot, but had like no idea how to get from point A to point B there. So that's why I started doing that.
I would love to hear about a project where you've like helped a client go from A to B and what that experience was like.
Yeah. Okay. So I just worked with a wedding planner who is starting a second business that's more like digital products for DIY brides that want to plan their wedding DIY style. And she has had brand photo shoots in the past, but she wasn't like always thrilled with how they turned out. And she had an idea for a photographer she wanted to work with, but we worked together to put together sort of like the vision. So I did a mood board for her. Based on the mood board, she and her photographer were able to find like a great location, one that her photographer knew of, that was very much in the vibe. And then I put together a prop list for her, a shot list, and then just some like a general outfit ideas. I'm like not a stylist at all, but like I was like something in this realm, whatever you think like you love on your body, great, go for it.
Yeah, but gives a great direction. Like this is what we're working with. Go from here.
Yeah. And then it's great because then she was able to send the mood board, all that stuff to the photographer being like, here's the plan. Yes. And the photographer's like, great, I totally get it. And that's the thing. Like, I think like when you work with a photographer, like
sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't.
Yeah, like sometimes you have to like, I mean, you always have to like explain the vision. Like the photographer needs to know like, what's the vibe? What are you thinking?
What are you going for? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like a lot of clients don't know how to do that. So it's nice to have a visual representation. And I always also send like a little Loom video for the photographer as well, being like, here's the general idea, but like let your creative juices flow. That's the other thing too, is like I always feel like I never want to like be stepping on the photographer's toes because I am like obsessed with what photographers do, and I want like everyone's creativity to be like maximized and like feel like there's like a sense of control happening either. But I also like it's a dance. It's a dance of me being like, here's the vibe, but please do you. Like,
and I think the more team members that can work collectively together, the better. Like, especially when you're communicating about the vision of what your client wants, there's a lot of pieces to it. And having the background knowledge of what your client has shared with you on what they want their website to look like, and then bringing that piece to the photographer and saying, hey, I've worked with this client. I know, I have this background and I know what we're after. Can you help us deliver on this? And then the photographer steps in. Sorry. Yep. And Arizona's genius creates the images, but with this vision in mind, like, I think it's a really cool, like, marriage of all of it. Like, let's meld it all together. And then the product is like 10 times better than if, say, someone just like came to you separately, said, hey, I want to design something. You're like, okay, yeah, but you need a brand photo shoot first. Go find a photographer, kind of like on your own. Good luck. And they just pick one that they maybe think is qualified, but they haven't communicated their vision, or maybe they haven't really vetted the photographer, or they don't really know like the style. And so it is a mismatch. Like, it could be a nightmare, and it could be like, and even if it turns out good, it could have been great. And so having that communication, I think it's just an extra step in the process that is very valuable and also really needed, because not many people are that middleman. And like you said, some vice versa too, like as a photographer, if you have somebody that has a vision for photography, but then goes to take and put those photos on a website, and they're DIYing their website, or they don't have a clear idea of what the flow is going to be for their website, it can also just be like good, not great. So I think it really works together. That's cool that you bring that together. Also, the conference that you're talking at, or speaking at, excuse me, off subject, but is, I think I saw another accountant. Is it Madison Dearly, I think? Is she coming to speak there?
She is.
Oh, that's so cool. She's also a Minnesota girl. So shout out to Madison.
Yeah.
She's going to be wondering, like, why is she being mentioned in this podcast? But I just thought of that now. That's really cool. Tell us more about the conference. You're going to be talking about brand photo shoots. It's for creatives.
So the conference itself is for web designers specifically. Okay. So cool. I'm going to be going there kind of talking through this brand photo shoot process and how they can help their clients if they desire if they desire to add that as a service. So it'll be really fun. We've got a bunch of really cool folks speaking. There's Jen from Tonic is going to be speaking.
Yes, I love those.
Amy Porterfield's going to speak. Cool. It's going to be like a whole moment. So I'm stoked for that. And I'm also turning it into like this sort of like little solo business retreat for myself to sort of like vision plan for 2025. So that'll be fun. I'm excited.
Very cool. So cool. Yeah. I love to hear all these things that you're up to. I feel like the podcast is just a great way to just catch up with people like you. And then listeners get to tune in and learn some things. Okay, so back to our listeners. Say they're in a place where, back up. When would you recommend a small business owner reach out to a web designer for to making their website?
Yeah, I think as soon as, I wouldn't say right away. I think DIYing your website for the first like year or two is like good. Like I think there's something about learning a platform and like just getting things started yourself. I mean, unless you have budget right in the beginning and you're like positive, but I feel like most people do not have budget right in the beginning. So if that's you, like definitely feel like a DIY is a moment. Yeah. But I think as soon as you start to see some momentum and you are clear on your service offerings, or like pretty clear on your service offerings, and when you've gotten to know yourself as a business owner a little bit, like I don't think you have to know yourself intimate. Like I think we're always learning, you know what I mean? But I think for me, like my favorite clients are the people that come to me. They're like, okay, I have a vision, but like I need help. Like if they can describe to me a vibe or a vision of who they are or what their business represents, that is great. And then just clarity on services. I think those are like the two major things.
So a good idea of what they're after and be very clear or pretty clear about what they want to offer.
Yeah.
That's a good response and a good guideline, because I think you can jump in too soon or also be the person that comes to you 10 years down the road and, like a nice website could have helped so much sooner. So just kind of that gauge of when to come, I think, is helpful for listeners to know. Totally. When to reach out to you. Very cool. Okay. So what would you say to a small business owner from the entrepreneurial perspective of like they're considering taking their business full time? And for this case, just imagine that there's no pandemic to like springboard them into their business. But what would you say to them, like an entrepreneur that's considering going full time?
I would say trust your gut. Like, I feel like you'll know when you can just take the reins and go. Like, I mean, even though I did have like sort of a training wheels sort of like off ramp.
Yeah. Kind of just helped you, just boost you right into it.
Yeah. There was a point where I had to like quit my VA job. And like, that was like a choice, you know what I mean? And I think that only happened when I felt like I was getting inquiries, like there was momentum, where I felt like however many hours a week I was working on the VA job, like if I did use that for my own Instagram posts, like I would, have return on investment of that time. Like, I think there's just like a point where you can feel in your gut, like, okay, like I think it's time and I think we can do this. And, or you could do the other, I mean, if I hadn't had the pandemic and if my life had panned out in a similar way, I'm sure, because I'm a Taurus, what would have happened is, because I'm obsessed with like stability and making sure I'm fine, like I probably would have just worked myself to the bone to make sure I had an off ramp, and did a 12, 16 hour day moment, and then eventually just let one of them go. So either way, if you were in a season of your life where you feel like you have energy to do a stability moment like that, then great. But if not, I think I think you'll feel in your gut that there's like a moment where you're like, okay, like I think let's try.
Time. Yeah,
and you know what? I also always think too, like, I even still think this, like, I'm always like, okay, well, if I don't get clients for whatever, like the next month or whatever it is, like I could just go get a random job doing something. Like, I guess it's, it's never,
always an option.
Yeah. It's always a thing. And I feel like I always keep that in the back of my mind whenever I'm freaking out about like low inquiries or whatever.
Which I get that too. Like you have low seasons and high seasons, even as a photographer. You have busy season and then winter hits and the inquiries slow down and it's easy to freak out a little bit. But can you speak to that a little bit too? Like going through the roller coaster of busy season or maybe less inquiries. Like how do you manage that? Is that stressful?
It's mostly an emotional game, right?
Truly.
Because like it always ends up being fine. Like that's the thing. Like it always, like something always ends up being pulling through.
So
and that's
true.
just like the universe. I don't know. It's crazy. Yeah. So the real like detriment to that is like your own just like emotional game. Yeah. So now I've just learned now, like, after so many, years of having those moments where you're just like, okay, what if I don't get a new one for this month or whatever? Like, yeah, it at a certain point, you're just like, okay, it's going to be fine. And if
it's
not,
going to work out.
Like, then great, I can go find something. Like,
right. Then we'll deal with it. Like, why? What's the saying? Like, don't borrow worry from tomorrow.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
We've got enough for today. Like, there's no sense in stressing, and it's easier said than done, especially if you are a Taurus or you like to be secure and have everything. I'm a Capricorn over here, so like, let's go for it. We got this.
Yes, you're like a huge like ambition girly.
Yes, but also that can be to my own detriment too, because then you grind and grind and grind, and then you're not really seeing maybe the stability side of it, like the security side of like, okay, let's make this work. Let's make sure we're on par here. That's also where my husband comes in, because we just had this conversation yesterday. I was super excited about this retreat I'm hosting, and I was going off about all these things we're doing. And I'm like, I'm bringing in this and this and this. And he kind of glazed over a little bit, and I don't blame him, but he's very much like, okay, and like, what's the budget? And like, are you making money with this? So voice a reason. You need both of those.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we hop off here, tell people where they can find you. Where do you hang out? How can they work with you?
Yes. Okay. So these days I am mostly on Instagram and my newsletter, which I send every Tuesday. I've been sending every Tuesday for the last 3 years or whatever.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you guys go subscribe to her newsletter. It's one of the only emails I look forward to getting every week. Seriously, it's really good.
Thanks.
Yes, of course.
So on my website, so sarahkleist.com is my website. You can subscribe to my newsletter there if you want, or work with me there if you want. Otherwise, my business Instagram is Kleist Creative. And you can find that on my website as well if you go there. Those are like my main two places. I also I do mess around on Threads a little bit, but I'm not consistent and I don't have a strategy. I just am just word vomiting there most of the time.
Just hanging out there. And Kleist is Kleist, right?
Yes.
Okay. Creative. German. Ooh, I'm Norwegian, so that's where I come from.
Love that.
Anyways, cool. Thank you so much. And this last question I ask everybody who's a guest on Reframed, and so I have to ask you too. If you could pick one word for listeners, anybody to remember you by, what would that word be?
Ooh.
Put you on the spot here. Also, you're good with words, so
What do people say? What are some examples?
Yes, I've gotten people that are like, I want to be known as like honest or comforting. Mm-hmm. I've gotten genuine, authentic. Like one all-encompassing word. It can be a phrase too of like, hey, they think of Sarah and they think of Kleist Creative and they think of like who you are as a person.
Ooh.
How would you want to be known?
I want to be known as having integrity.
So good.
Yeah. That's really important to me.
Yeah.
I feel very like human first in everything I do. Yeah.
Love that. Yes, very down to earth, and you are exactly just like we started this off and I was like, she delivered on everything when she was my web designer. Like, you're very clear on your process. So everything is done with an integrity with Sarah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thanks for having me. It's so fun and so nice to chat with you and see you.
It's just like catch up. I know. It does feel like we're just catching up again. It's awesome.
Literally.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.